Welcome to Cryptic Accounts, a podcast by paranoid people for paranoid people. I'm your host for the week, Dennis Cheney, and this week we have part 2 of Into the Fringe, a true story of alien abduction by Karla Turner. I want to ask everyone right now to go ahead and hit that like, share, subscribe button, to leave a comment, and do all those other things. Share this episode with a friend or the last episode you enjoyed with a friend. And so we're ready to get into this. I am joined, as always, by my co-host and platonic life partner, Patrick Ryan. How are you doing, Patrick?
Hello, Dennis. I am doing good, ready to get back into the Fringe and what's going on with Karla. And it was her husband, right?
Karla and her husband, Elton, is how we started.
Yeah.
So I remember leaving you profoundly bummed out last time.
Yeah,
Which
I
is
do
always
remember that.
it's always my goal, but I shot too far, and you were a little too bummed out.
It
I
was
would I
it was a very downer episode. I was very bummed. Yeah, no,
I would encourage everyone. I know I've been doing a lot of multi-parters lately. Unlike Genesis Revisited, where we can go back through basically the whole thing up to where we need to be, this one is just a lot of alien abduction stories and strange, like, psychedelic experiences. So I really encourage everyone, if you can, to go back and listen to the first one. But I will do my best to set up the summary if this is where you're starting and you just refuse to listen to the beginning.
Yeah, do a little catch up. Give me a little.
Okay, I'll do a little.
Remind me what's going on. Help them remind me.
So this is the first book of 3 by Karla Turner, PhD, who was a logic and English professor.
Yeah.
And she wrote this first book in 1992, and it's basically the recounting of her diary from the late 1980s.
Hmm.
And she started to describe it. Okay, so long story short, for whatever reason, she had assigned to one of her logic classes to write books about UFOs. This got her into reading UFO literature, to look into this, like, the stuff that her students are writing, basically to fact check them. And around this time, her husband started having terrible nightmares and anxiety. These are 2 very successful people. Like, she's a professor, he was this like technology executive out in the Southwest. So her husband Elton started having all this anxiety and nightmares. Eventually she hypnotized him on their couch, and he described an alien abduction experience from when he was 5 years old. And this bled into other experiences that he had into his teenage years, and it also up until December of 1987, which is like 5 months before she starts keeping this diary.
Yeah, it was like some sort of like almost a long-term like science project or something.
He described as a kid how he would sit in this classroom with this guy that he called the Old One, which is like this very wrinkly, old-looking gray.
Shout out to the old one.
Shout out to the Old One, who also, in another experience, he described being a beam of light. Elton described being a beam of light prior to being born, and basically watching the Old One construct his body inside of his mother's womb.
Whew.
See, the Old One, and he does not think the Old One is God or anything. He describes him as like almost this intermediary type instrument. And the Old One is this very old looking biological gray, and he controls all these other little mechanical grays to like do his bidding.
Oh boy.
And not only was he taught by the Old One from his early childhood, and then I guess constructed in his womb by the Old One, he also kept being visited and abducted. They kept taking pieces of him. They told him specifically, "We need pieces of you. This is part of the deal. You made a deal basically before we constructed you." And also, in his teenage years, he started being visited by this very tall, white, wispy-haired woman who would like have like what I can only describe as like clinical sexual relations with him. She would just like come in, do the business, and leave. And then sometimes the Old One was like in the corner of the room watching, like taking notes or whatever. So he's this lifelong science experiment. He seems to have been constructed, or at least they want him to think that they constructed him, and they kept visiting him throughout his life. And also, this is corroborated. Like the childhood experience was corroborated by his parents. He had an experience in his teenage years that was corroborated by a girlfriend. There was a missing time experience where he saw a UFO over a courthouse that was corroborated by Karla, his wife, and the author of this book, just like 6 months before she started keeping her journal. And as they started getting into these hypnotic regressions and going back through his lifetime of experiences, it started to destroy their family, basically. And they started trying to cope with this. They started going to therapy. They went to this MUFON group, which is the Mutual UFO Network. And Karla started having experiences herself, one of which is when she woke up in her room and there was this group of people that she couldn't quite make out standing in the corner. And they were all speaking in one voice saying, "This is Elioma or Eliana for the longing for what you've asked for." Um, and so where we left off was they had met a woman named Barbara, who was a hypnotist and a UFO researcher. And we got into her background last time. And Barbara actually was killed in a mysterious car wreck a few years ago, as Karla was also killed by a mysterious fast-growing cancer. And I was very intrigued. We're going to get back into that in this episode. But Karla started to have these experiences of her own. There was this weird thing where she met her ancestors by a tree that like followed her home and started telling her spiritually, like through her mind, how to like cook a certain thing for her husband.
Hmm.
There's just a lot of weird experiences. And where we left off was that basically they'd met Barbara, who's a professional researcher, UFOologist, and a hypnotist, and they started doing hypnotic sessions with her. But Karla, at this point, it's still all about Elton. But at this point, and all of this book takes place between 1988 and 1990, and Karla had yet to actually delve into her own experiences. So where we left off last time was that Karla was just about to explain the situation, was starting to move beyond her husband Elton's experiences into their son, who is named David, his friend, who is named James, and David's girlfriend, Megan. And she basically just hinted that this phenomenon is getting ready to blossom into all of them, and not just Elton.
Okay. I mean, there's a lot going on with these people.
Was that too much? Was that too little?
No, I think that was a good explanation. I don't know why I didn't catch when you were going back over it this time, like the part where you were talking about how like the old one or whatever told Elton that he like had made a deal previously. It almost kind of reminded me of something along the lines of like the soul stealing stuff.
Yeah, it does.
Like somehow something else trying to mimic being a human in some way. I don't know. It hit me a little bit different in the review now, thinking back on all of it. Maybe it's because I've had some time for all of it to kind of soak in.
There was a lot of weird stuff. So Karla started having dreams also where this large praying mantis figure would like tell her that it's her mother. And she also would have these dreams where she would see these like doll type creatures that would tell her that they're her children and were upset that she wasn't spending time with them. There's a lot of mom, dad creation stuff.
There was a lot of that with the human hybrid, like like all that stuff, like trying to either actually using people for some sort of weird crossbreeding thing or making them believe that they're involved in some sort of crossbreeding thing.
Yeah, and I'm kind of the opinion, we can get into it later, but I'm kind of the opinion that that whole thing's a lie.
It's just a scam.
Yeah.
They're just trying to get you to believe this.
Well, think about the power you would have over another race of people if you convinced them that you were literally their creators.
Yeah, that's true.
Think about what that would subvert. So we left off there basically in July of 1988. And at this point, literally, this is like 3 months into this family going from not believing into UFOs into the dad's a lifelong abductee and everyone's having these weird bedtime experiences.
Oh, it's a season of change for sure.
This woman's life changed so much. I'll give one other reminder. This woman literally had a successful career as a professor. Her husband was a successful executive. Their whole life became about this from 92 to 96. And it basically, that's all they did after 96 until she was either tragically struck down by cancer and or murdered in the 2000s. And it's such a weird life trajectory. But so we're leaving off in August of 1988, which is where we're going to pick back up. So Karla had been part of this mutual UFO network group that they had been going to visit. And by the way, there were mysterious cars like following them home from that group, if you remember last time. So she got an announcement from the group that the next guest at the next session would be a special one. It was going to be John Lear. And John Lear is a person who we will eventually end up doing episodes and episodes about, both about his life and his research and his books. He's kind of a legend. This is taken from UFO Fandom Wiki, and it says that John Olson Lear is a UFO personality and conspiracy theorist, author of the book Dark Side Hypothesis. Lear is most notable for introducing Bob Lazar to George Knapp for KLAS interviews that started the 9-part project called UFOs: The Best Evidence, which is a great series, by the way. And I made a note here for myself that George Knapp is a UFO journalist who is considered the mentor to Jeremy Corbell. Jeremy Corbell is the filmmaker who just this week released that unclassified Navy UFO footage.
The triangle.
The triangle and there's like a sphere inside of a cube. I don't know if you've seen that one, but it's pretty weird.
All right.
So, and he says he's got a lot more to come, including this week. But George Knapp is nobody to sleep on. Jeremy Corbell is literally making history right now, and John Lear was kind of at the beginning of all of this. So John Lear was actually the son of the creator of the Lear jet.
Oh, wow.
And oddly enough, he flew like freelance missions for the CIA.
From what I've learned about the CIA, do you think they're really they play a lot of things really fast and loose? Like, that doesn't even surprise me that he was like freelancing for the CIA. They just called him when they needed like a day gig pilot.
Yeah, it's funny because when you read like his biographies or stuff online about him, John Lear always said, I flew planes for the CIA. And then the mainstream media always says, no. He was just a freelancer who did certain missions.
Okay.
Like, okay, what's the difference? Like,
because he wasn't an employee of the CIA? Like,
yeah, he was a 1099er and not a... Yeah, it's weird. So...
That's how they get you, so they got to give you insurance and stuff.
Oddly
CIA,
enough...
selling coke, screwing people on insurance. Just the full circle.
I kind of suspect his missions actually probably were delivering drugs, because when you read about the official story, it was, no, he wasn't an employee. He was just contracted to drop off certain shipments.
Things they couldn't directly be involved with, probably.
Right, and they used the UFO guy, which is so weird. And also the fact that his dad invented this highly successful airplane, and then
that's probably how you have the connections with the government, because your dad invented the Learjet. Your dad definitely knows people high up in the government, more than likely.
He's like, all right, son, I'm gonna get you a job. Now I wanted to go into the dark side hypothesis a little bit, and this actually took a bit of time, but I've shortened it here. Okay. And it has to do with where this book is going a little bit. Now, John Lear's dark side hypothesis is that the aliens signed a treaty with the USA around the late 50s, early 60s to do unlimited abductions in exchange for giving us technology.
There's like a free pass, like take whatever you want from the herd.
We signed a treaty that said, abduct whoever you want, but we want that sweet alien technology.
Oh man, weird. Okay. All right.
Also, I got to go back into this theme of take our biological constituents or use us how you like in exchange for technology. It's such a Nephilim thing.
Yeah.
It's the same deal. Sleep with our daughters and then give us swords. It's the same
Teach
deal.
us magic. Teach us how
Yeah,
to work iron.
it's the
Yeah.
exact same deal. So, but the problem is, says Lear, is that the aliens broke their side of the bargain, resulting, and this has to be an episode, resulting in what is called the Dulce Wars.
Oh yeah, yeah. I've got some stuff saved on this.
Yeah, I read about it
which
too.
which one of us gets to that episode first?
Mm,
Because yeah, no, it's ugh.
one of us will. And that was a confrontation between the U.S. military and the aliens that led to the death of many U.S. scientists.
Yep.
And the way that they broke the deal, I want to make it clear because I was confused at first and I kept having to read into it. I was like, how did they break the deal? We did offer them unlimited abductions. The way that they broke the deal is that the technology that they gave us, and it seems like the way they gave us technology was through these crashes, the Roswell crash, etc.
Mm,
They would give us technology through that. As our scientists investigated the technology, they basically found out that it was fraudulent.
really?
Yeah, that they weren't giving us anything workable. They were trying to lead us down dead ends.
Huh. Huh.
And
Yeah.
that kind of matches up with Bob Lazar, who says that they were working on these crafts, but they could never actually get it to work. They couldn't get it to work. They were given like a full craft and they couldn't get it to fly.
Is like throwing somebody like a Matchbox car as a car. Like just
Right.
throwing it, but it's life size, but it doesn't have a real engine in it. It looks like it has everything that you would need. It looks
Yeah.
like a car, but it's just a trinket.
Or dropping off a real car, but you took out the engine and you put in like a washing machine, and you're
Oh
like,
yeah,
here's a car, and then you just like laugh as they spend 50 years trying to figure out how this washing machine makes the car go. Like that's kind of the idea. So the aliens broke their promise.
we finally figured it out. We're like, hey, you guys have been giving us like not good stuff for a while now. Like,
We did actually. That's the story. Is we actually figured it out around the early 70s,
mm-hmm.
and we were like, okay, the deal is off, and they're like, okay, and then of course they kept abducting people.
We're like, what are you gonna do to stop us? Like,
Right.
it took you this long to figure out that we were giving you fake stuff.
Or who knows what they said. They're extremely deceptive apparently.
Well, yeah, there's a bunch of there's different ones running around doing different things. Like they're all these whatever these things are, they're not all on the same page.
No.
Like they've each got their own agendas. Like it seems like some of them are probably working against each other at times.
That would stand to reason. Unless there's a larger deception. I don't know.
That's possible too.
This is a larger issue. Like, who knows? Like, who knows? Like, it would stand to reason that if we're part of this like cosmic world, that they have wars amongst themselves, and some are for us and some are against us.
Yeah.
It would also stand to reason, though, that if this is some sort of spiritual phenomenon, that maybe maybe even that's a lie.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Oh, you mean like the inner fighting is really just a facade as something just to put on a play for us, basically to make us think there's these different levels of thing when it really is just the two sides going at each other.
Good cop, bad cop.
Yep. Well, kind of, I guess, yeah.
In a way, a ruse like, okay,
but
we're the good
cop,
aliens,
bad cop
aliens.
that actually fight each other too. I get what you're saying.
Right. Some kind of ploy. So apparently the aliens kept doing it anyway.
Well, and yeah, then what are we gonna do?
Exactly. And then in the 1980s, we gave in and we said, well, we might as well sign another treaty to work with you. And then we started working together. there's also this this is a total side note, but who knows, because Karla wrote 3 books and I plan on going through all of them eventually. There's a very weird side note when you get into Mr. Lear's research about Jesus, and I thought I had to include it because of.
Okay.
So apparently the aliens swear that they created Jesus.
See, and that would make sense that you would want to create that deception, whether you're an actual extraterrestrial or this is a spiritual phenomenon that's happening.
It would give you a lot of cultural power.
Yes.
Either way. And it gets really in depth. One of us has to do a John Lear episode. So they have something they call, I think it's called the Yellow Book, but it is essentially a machine which the aliens claim is a holographic representation of all of human history. And apparently they show this to US government officials to like prove how powerful they are and how long they've been around.
Okay.
And one of the holographs is of the crucifixion. And apparently,
I mean, have you seen Passion of the Christ? Like, they could make a movie.
yes, exactly. But they claim to have this hologram, which, by the nature of holograms, if you take a photograph of it or a video of it, it looks kind of crappy.
Mm-hmm.
But apparently, according to John Lear, there is in the possession of the US government video footage of the hologram of the crucifixion of Jesus Christ.
Okay.
And this is being saved at some point to be used however they want to use it.
Yeah, but I mean, so even if they do, it's legit footage. That doesn't necessarily make them the creator of Christ. You were around to film it.
Yeah, but who knows what happens before or after?
Well, that's okay. I haven't seen the hologram, so I don't know.
I haven't seen the videotape of the hologram, and this would literally be videotape because they would have shown this to us as a hologram in the like 60s or 70s, and we would have used literal film to film it.
Yeah.
It'd be this really crappy representation. But this is a total sidebar, but I just thought that was incredibly fascinating. That apparently the government might have been tricked or given by aliens videotape of the crucifixion.
Yeah.
And I can only imagine, given all the theories we have about who these things really are and like what's going to happen in the future, like how that might be used.
Yeah.
Could you imagine if the US government said on ABC, on CBS, 60 Minutes, Sunday night, we're going to show the videotape we got from the aliens of the crucifixion, what that would do to society?
Oh yeah, it would probably change some stuff.
Yeah. Sure. So this is the guy. Long story short, they're going to see John Lear, and that's coming up in September. But at this point in August, they're just eagerly awaiting it. And Karla starts talking to her oldest friend Bonnie. They've been friends for like 20 to 30 years, and she's trying to. Karla, if you remember from the last episode, is kind of losing her mind because she's not a believer in aliens. She feels like all this stuff's invading her life, and she's like desperately trying to talk to someone who isn't in the UFO community and isn't her husband about it. So she reaches out to her friend Bonnie, and she's trying to play it real coy. She's like super embarrassed. And she's basically trying to like float some of these ideas out there to see like what happens. And so she first starts with saying, "Hey, like, did you know that my husband is doing hypnosis?" And she starts trying to explain like what hypnosis is. And Bonnie's like, "Oh, that's very interesting. You talk to his subconscious, whatever." And then she shows Bonnie one of the pictures he drew of the entities. Bonnie immediately freaks out, goes into tears. Karla asks her what's wrong, and Bonnie just says, "I don't know, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know." And then she presses her further, and Bonnie says, "I didn't think anyone else knew."
What? Okay, so Bonnie's an old friend of hers.
Bonnie's an old friend of the Karlas.
of Karla's, not her husband. So doesn't
Nope.
know husband, growing up. Oh,
It
ooh.
starts to seem like everyone this woman knows has been abducted.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of is worrisome on like who you come in contact with. Like
I know, right?
that's what I get out of this. Like, I may be cool, but what if I start? What if I've been hanging out with somebody that's really had this going on, and it's gonna affect me too? Like, this is a weird. I've never heard of that phenomenon where it's like affecting a circle of people like that unknowingly. Like the
Right.
Bonnie wasn't seeking this at any point. I don't think. I don't know the whole story behind Bonnie.
No, no, literally Bonnie's entire role is she just happens to be a friend of Carla's for many years, and then Karla just wanted to maybe float the idea to see if she sounded crazy, and immediately Bonnie's like, I didn't think anyone else knew about this.
Okay, so Bonnie's on board.
So, um, yeah, and I also wonder, based on the like the childhood stuff and the way that they seem to direct people, if there's like multiple options. One is, are they doing this to everyone or many, many people? And it's just very much more common than we thought abduction was. Two is like, does this woman, Karla, happen to be in a hive of some sort? Like it's just happenstance. Or three would be, is there are all these connections made somehow by these aliens throughout the years to keep them all in a friend circle?
Yeah, and some sort of a cluster where they're easier to monitor or somehow watch their interaction.
Right.
I don't know. I get what you're saying there, and that's kind of where my mind was going as you were describing it. Like, is this maybe like for somehow they're drawing these people together, or they've created circumstances, or are some of these like people direct plants in some way that's creating this? Like, I don't know.
Yeah,
Back
I
to
don't
the
know
hybrid
either.
stuff, like, is some of these maybe just weird other things that are kind of helping congeal these together too.
Yeah, exactly. So I had hinted at the end of the last episode that her son David, who's really Elton's son from another marriage, started having his own experiences, and these were started out relatively minor, as did Carla's. Mostly, he would be lying in bed, he would find himself paralyzed, he would felt like an energy moving up through him, and eventually he decided to confide in his best friend and his roommate James. And James seemed interested but didn't say a lot. So eventually, Elton, Karla, James, David, and David's girlfriend Megan would all go to this Lear lecture.
Okay.
And Lear would, at the lecture, go on to explain his dark side hypothesis, or at least what it was at that time. He mentions the deal that the government had. He mentions that the aliens broke the deal, and then the main point of the lecture is that the aliens really left our government at a sort of quandary. Like, where in the world do we go from here?
Yeah.
We've given permission for these things to take people. We've gotten nothing in return, and we're completely powerless. And Lear ended his lecture by saying, I'm not here to warn about alien invasion. The invasion is over. It's already happened.
Whoa.
I worry about this all the time.
Man, I that's a possibility you don't really think about until somebody puts it like that.
I worry because they say, you hear a lot of times like, well, if the aliens wanted to hurt us, they would have done it by now. Their technology is so good. But then I think
Mm-hmm.
about like cows. And what if a cow woke up one day and suspected, like, I'm part of a big system and humans are trying to destroy us? All the other cows would be like, well, look, Bessie, if the humans wanted to destroy us, they would have destroyed us by now. And then all Bessie can do is sit and think about, well, I know humans are trying to destroy us, but also that makes logical sense that they would have destroyed us by now, without ever realizing the concept that you're part of a farm, you're being bred, you're
Where
being murdered.
they're using something from us.
Yeah.
Like you
And
said, Elton was having biological pieces taken of him, and he was being used to procreate in some way.
Yeah.
Ugh.
So I worry, what if the invasion has already happened, and then how would we ever get out of that? Oh, anyway, so
Well, step one would be figuring out that it's actually going on. But then, I don't know how you move past that. Like, what your reaction is to that in any way. Like, okay, what do we do? Like,
well, let's say you and me have cracked the code. We got to work up the whole chain of humanity.
yeah. Because we're gonna have to start knocking some of these real ones down in some way, and like getting technology from it, I guess. That or we have better technology. The government has better technology than what we're aware of, and maybe there's an answer at this point.
These type of stories, plus all
And is
these
that
Navy
why we're
UFO
working?
stuff.
And is that why we're working closer and closer to just full disclosure of everything, because we're like finally ready to like ramp up and like do something about all this?
We're ready for that Independence Day Part 2 war,
Yeah.
where we have all their stuff. But then again, I mean, according to this, and according to a couple of other things I read this week, oddly enough, it appears that they've been lying to us about technology.
Like,
Or
what do
the
you mean?
things,
Like,
well,
it's not actually as good as what they've made us believe?
whatever they give us is we're unable to duplicate it.
Well, yeah, we're gonna have to like, I don't know. That's the stuff that's crashing though. We're gonna have to
Yeah,
like
but
knock stuff down.
yeah, we're gonna have to get a real one.
That's what I mean. Like, we're gonna have to knock stuff down. Like, whatever the best stuff is. I don't know.
But
But
even then, let's say we knock one down. Who's to say they didn't let us knock that one down? It's another wild goose
well,
chase.
it's true. But yeah, with everything that's been going on, especially in the last year or so, with like just full on just disclosure, like, yep, it's happening. We've been taking stuff. We don't know what to do with it. Like, just Navy, everybody just full on just admitting to this all of a sudden. We've been talking about it. They're prepping us for something, but I hadn't really considered like, are we getting ready to fight back against something?
I'm getting worried that it's either that, but my bigger worry is that what if they really did make these two deals in the 50s and the 80s? And what if they keep getting tricked? And the third government play is to say, sorry for lying. We were part of a deal, and we don't have any idea where to go from here.
Well, they've got to have some sort of response, because that would be why you would hold off doing it. But now we're to the point where they're moving forward into admitting that it's going on.
Right, but what if the only reason they weren't admitting it is because they had like a treaty?
Well, that's fine, but I mean, okay, even if that's the case, why are they now openly going to say it if they don't have a solution of some form?
Because
Of at
they're
least, hey, we're going to
terrified.
try and fight back. Like, this is what you need to look for. Everybody's
Well,
got to get hypnotized. I don't know. It'll be the whole
maybe
anti hypnotist movement that
they
are
could.
friendly to the extraterrestrials and don't want to get involved. It'll be a whole thing.
That probably will happen, actually.
I know it will. We're humanity, of course. At least
They
30% of us will feel that way.
honestly, here's my fear reading this and reading the stuff from this week in the news. What if they have nowhere to go? What if you're the dark secrets of the government and you think you have all these secret information, you have all this secret technology, and you're building these secret machines, and you find out we've been lied to for 60 years, and then you just look at yourself as another human being and you say, we've been had. I have no idea where to go. And the only thing you could do is try to disclose pieces of it to the public to try to
Mm,
start getting information.
to see if somebody you can crowdsource figuring out how to deal with this.
Or I think about Kim Jong Un. Think about how
I do frequently. Go on.
I do also. So think about how he is apparently like a god figure, and his dad was a god, and his grandfather was a god, and his
Yep.
grandfather was the one who started the Cold War there. Um, think about how recently Kim Jong Un has been making a lot of admissions to his people about how bad the government is.
Yeah, and
And like,
it's a weird move. It is a weird move from him for sure.
it is weird, but I think anyone, I think anyone, if you really think about it, you can see that he's doing that because he kind of inherited this kingship that eventually, will have him strung up in a town square, if those people have any sense.
I mean, if not him, then his offspring. Like, it's coming.
He knows he's in that situation, and he's also smart enough to look at stuff and realize that he's been propagandized and realize stuff's not that good. And so he literally cried. He's cried a couple times in front of the public.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I almost wonder if
He's a dictator with a heart.
he's a dictator who's like, I inherited this and I don't know where to go from here. Like, I can't keep my boot off your neck because you'll kill me, but I also have to tell you I'm sorry because maybe I kind of feel like that's where the deep state is right now. If they really have been bamboozled by these entities, they might be giving a disclosure to the public as a way of saying, you're right, I'm sorry, I can't tell you everything, but here's a few things that are true, so maybe you don't blame me when stuff goes down.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
That's the vibe I get. So,
I mean, it's mounting towards something. They never just hand out information for no apparent reason whatsoever, like just for fun, like especially stuff that's been like actively buried for like decades.
right. But that's also why I'm saying, like, we think of America as the group, as the nation that is completely in control. But this is a situation where they're out of control.
Yeah.
It's completely out of control. That's why I used Kim Jong-un as an example of someone who is completely in control, but what does it look like when they start to lose their grasp?
Yeah.
And so I seriously worry. I would love, first of all, I wouldn't love it, but the idea that we have like engineered the technology and we can like fight them now and it's getting close to the Space Force and all this stuff, that is like a second or third best option. I think the worst option is the fact that we've been completely bamboozled, completely outsmarted, and they don't know anywhere else to go other than to start telling the truth because they've found themselves in such a corner that it might screw the rest of the world.
Even then, in that scenario, the pride and the hunger for power, I don't know that would be the motivation. Like, I think they would ride that into the ground. Like, I don't think they're throwing their hands up and going, I don't know how to deal with this, I'm going to be honest now. Like, I don't think that's not generally the move. I don't think they suddenly had a change of heart.
Well, we know that they're not completely honest. Otherwise, it wouldn't be drip, drip, drip.
Well, no cheating spouses.
Right. That's how they exactly. But exactly. But here's what worries me is what if they see the situation as being close to being run into the ground?
Yeah. I mean, I get it. I see the angle. I think pride gets in the way. And why? Because if you admit that and that you are powerless, you lose a lot of other power just with humans. Because you're now very fallible and you're not in control.
But who is in control of this? Look at
Well,
the way they're framing it. They're framing it as a national security risk. So you're going to give them more money to keep fighting it.
Or you're going to have a bunch of citizens trying to now interact on their own with these. I don't know. If you have a bunch of awake people, though, about it, though, like, I think a lot more gets tracked. Following where they're going would be a lot easier. If we were all out looking up in the sky all the time, like, we would see them.
Yeah.
And we've got apps and stuff, like you could be marking it the whole way across, and then we could figure out where it's disappearing at. And a lot of it's in mountains or in the oceans, and we have subs and helicopters and stuff there to go figure out where it went. We've got thermals, we've got stuff we could use to do this. We're just not. I don't know, and I guess the government probably is doing that already. I don't know. It's a very weird thing to ponder as to everything that's going on here.
I'm just starting to come to the conclusion that we might be completely out of control.
I don't want it to be that. So I'm trying to construct other things. And
I
even as I
know.
explained that one, I'm like, well, the government would already know how to track them, and they would, if that was the solution, and we could just show up with pitchforks at their mountain, we
Right.
would have already done that.
Right.
So that's not it. So you're right. Yeah, it doesn't help. Maybe I don't know. I can't think of. I have a hard time justifying why they would suddenly reverse course. And I know you're saying like because they're giving up. I have a hard time believing that's the reason. I want it to be the fight angle, if anything. Like,
Well, this might be part of the fight. I mean, for instance, look how they're using SpaceX and all these other things to try to expedite like space exploration. Like they might be
yeah,
like, "Oh, we've kept all of this secret for so long. Let's try to get stuff going through the free market. Maybe that's like our best way as humans to do things." I worry.
oh no,
I
I'm worried in all of these scenarios. I'm worried. I'm ready to find out, but I'm also very worried about how that's going to go down.
I hope we don't find out. I hope that it stays far enough. I hope it stays far enough from us that we can just speculate.
Continue to have this show for the rest of our life.
I actually thought today, it was odd. I was out walking my dog today, and I had the thought of what happens when a month from now there's some sort of the aliens disclose themselves. What would the podcast look like?
I mean, I could. I mean, we'd be going over the new information. I think.
We would, but
And
also,
discussing that because I mean, like we cover a lot of like disclosed government conspiracies where they've admitted to wrongdoing in documentation, and that didn't change the show. You know what I mean? Like there would be new information. We would have their stuff to go through. Then whatever they're telling us, like
but
of
that,
processing this new information,
yeah,
it
that's
would
what it
change
would
the
be.
show. But I don't. We would definitely still have a show.
That's really what I was hoping for you to say. Is when we're
Yeah.
all wearing space collars and working in a rock mine, I just want to know we can do the
I'm
podcast.
looking forward to my silver onesie.
Welcome to Cryptic Accounts 2021.
Hail
And
Sultan.
hail Zoltan. Exactly.
Sultan.
You're amazing. Okay, so back into the subject matter. Karla took her husband Elton, their son David, his friend James, and Megan to the speech by John Lear. In the middle of the speech, James, their son's friend, became extremely nervous. He started bouncing his leg. He like couldn't take it anymore, and he left early to go back to his hotel room.
Oh, you never leave the group.
No, you don't. And
You seen
Karla,
it? Have you ever seen a suspense thriller, James? You never leave the group to go off on your own and have an adventure.
well, Karla just assumed that it was like boring or it was like freaking him out. Like it's this literal lecture. So she's like, "Oh, he didn't like it."
Yeah. Well, if he
So,
doesn't say anything and just gets up and walks away, yeah, you're gonna assume that like he's not happy about the situation. He's
yes,
leaving.
and also Karla at this time's in denial, and she's like, "Oh, well, he must see this as nonsense." She wants to assume that.
Well, I'm sure she's feeling kind of crazy at this point. Even
Oh,
with
she
all the
is.
different people that it's like affecting around her, like everybody's kind of, we're 3 months into this, everybody feels a little crazy, like super crazy. Like I can tangibly tell this is happening, but it doesn't seem like it should be real.
We're 3 months into it, and we are 4 years away from her publishing this book. So she is all kinds of
A
confused.
lot of inner turmoil going on for
I
sure.
I still get the vibe at this point that she's trying to like convince her husband that this isn't real,
Hmm.
but she's also having these other weird dreams. But this is, it's only because she's keeping a diary. So James goes away. The lecture was very good. Nobody hears from James for 2 days.
Hmm.
James then calls David, who's his roommate, and asks him to come have drinks at a local bar.
I can just see you at the house.
Right. No, he's like, I have to meet you at this bar.
All right.
So David goes and meets him, and James divulges that for all of his life, he's been visited by strange beings in his bedroom.
Oh my God. I knew it was coming. Like I knew that's what you were going to tell me, but it's still, when I hear it, it's just, how are these people all together like this? This is crazy.
It is crazy.
So James has got things he's seeing. What's he got going on?
Okay, so James says that throughout his childhood, he would wake up in the middle of the night to meet a strange, skinny man in all black who would be picking up random objects in his house. He would hear noises. He would hear like noises in the living room. And so James would get up, he would go out, and he would see like this long, slender black man picking up like a clock and looking at it, picking up like a VCR and looking at it, picking up like a cup and looking at it, like just investigating things.
Weird. That's
And he would,
weird.
it is
Like,
this
are you
whole
guys
thing
more
is weird.
advanced species that have been here forever, or are you new? Like, which is it? Like, why do sometimes they seem very confused by things like the Men in Black with like the silverware and stuff, like not being able to eat properly and function motor skill wise like that? Like, do you guys know us or not? Like, which is it?
It's almost both. It's like they're inside our minds, but it's something. I personally believe it's a dichotomy between our minds, which is where we share a space with them, and our physical space, which they don't have access to. Like
this is a new theory coming forward.
Okay, well,
That is the first I've heard of this. So, like, are you like refer to them as like almost like an energy, like spiritual realm sort of thing?
spiritual or extra dimensional, it seems that where we connect
But you're not
seems
saying it's like a projection of our own minds.
no.
Okay, that's what
No,
I
no,
thought you were saying.
there are our own entities, but I think the way we could, they all seem to be telepathic with us,
Yeah, there's a lot of that going on.
but they also seem to be like befuddled by like basic human instruments and how to deal with them.
Yes.
And there also seems to be this through line through Whitley Strieber and through other literature that when they tell us what their life is like, they seem to be outside of time
Okay.
and kind of frozen in a certain way, and that they have to use parts of us to try to experience like the physical existence. And
Okay.
this brings me to, this is my overall theory. I didn't think I'd get into this, but at this point it makes me think of angels and demons who are essentially spiritual, so they can communicate with your mind, but they're not physical in the way we are. Like a demon can't build a house and work a farm and raise a family. He can like maybe manifest some energy to do some things,
Yeah, I get
but
what you're saying.
he more or less exists on our mental level. And so
Okay, I get what you're saying now by the in our minds part. Okay, that makes sense.
yeah, right.
Everything is right in the world.
Nothing is right in this
No,
world.
based on everything you're telling me in these episodes, no, nothing is right. And it's about to get weirder. Like every week, one of these weeks we're gonna have just this weird bombshell. I mean, we've had some on the show, but just some crazy full disclosure
It's gonna happen eventually.
UFO over the White House sort of stuff.
Yeah, I feel like soon. Either that or they're, man, if you really think about it, UFOs over the White House happened in the 50s.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, as I said it, I'm like, we already did this, and again, I still think that was probably the Nazis.
Yeah, that's a whole
I'm
other
still on
thing.
that. Yeah, we could. Yeah.
So, oh Lord. And also, hey, how about this? How about if the Nazis people meet aren't actually living Nazis? What if the Nazis sold their souls to demons and that's who people are meeting?
Oh, that's a weird twist.
Just an idea. I mean, I'd say all this stuff intertwines in such weird
Yeah.
ways. That's why we can't trust anything.
Pretty much.
So Carla, James, Elton, David, and Megan are all at this lecture from Bob Lazar. James gets extremely nervous, walks out. 2 days later, he calls David to come have drinks at a local bar.
Okay.
At this bar, he describes that he has strange visitations in his bedroom at night as a child. He would wake up in the middle of the night, he'd see this dark being looking at objects, and then suddenly, when he was a little older, he would see who he calls Mr. Green Jeans.
Oh, that's a weird nickname.
I believe that's actually a 1960s or 70s television character.
Okay.
But as a child, he called him Mr. Green Jeans because this entity would put off a greenish glow.
Okay. Weird.
One night, James woke up and he saw all of his toys moving by themselves around the room. And then suddenly, Mr. Green Jeans approached and told him, "Do not be afraid." James at this point was also paralyzed.
Okay.
Later, a taller, darker figure appeared to him and began speaking to him telepathically. Then, as an even older person, James and David at that point were living in a farmhouse. And a woman would start to enter James's room through a side door that basically led to nowhere.
Mm,
Do you remember the stories about Elton meeting this like wispy-haired woman who was like having
yeah.
sex with him? Yeah, so something similar to that started interacting with James on a weekly basis.
Okay.
And this is a direct quote from the book. James says, "One time she was in my room, but it was just her head and her hands. She was holding two big, round, black orbs, and she told me they wanted to remove my eyes and replace me with those things." Terrified, James objected, saying he didn't want to be blind, but the woman replied, "You'll still be able to see, but you'll see differently." She had also spoken of replacing various parts of James.
Oh, weird. All right, so now we're like making weird cyborgish. I don't know even know what to call it. Like, ugh,
I don't know
ugh.
either. I don't know either. Um,
It's very uneasy though. Like, ugh.
I almost wonder. So, remember our episode on the CIA escaping time and
Mhm.
space? So, if we exist in this higher realm, I almost wonder if this entity that exists in those higher realms wouldn't be able to give you something that's like pretty close to your eye,
Mhm.
but it has other sights. You know what I mean? Like what would technology look like if you existed on the higher realm?
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about it. What if they like offered you legs that like you could like run way faster than anybody else or jump way higher? Like, are you on board to like let them swap some parts out? Or are you like, no, I want to stay with my regular human legs? Or whatever.
Right. It's also weird that there always seems to be a bargain.
Yeah, they want something. That yeah, that's a good question. Like, what was his end of this?
Well, it's weird because he said no and she's like, "Okay."
Huh.
And then but also in other like abductee experiences, sometimes they'll just do something and then later they'll tell you, "Well, you made a bargain." You might not remember it, but
It's just an easy lie to tell you almost.
yeah, it really is. Also, either it's an easy lie or man, this is sensitive, but think about roofies.
Yeah. Do they drug you and then get you to agree to things while
And
you're
then
under the influence?
and then they write it down in some contract, and they're like, "Oh, remember you told us we could put this thing in your ear, or
Yeah.
we could replace your eyeballs, or we could take your child." It almost seems like that abusive. I just am so extremely distrustful of these entities. And I know someday they're going to show up, and I'm going to say, "No, no, 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 do not trust them." It seems like a roofie thing, because everyone who deals with them has some kind of psycho normal experience where everything seems out of proportion. They don't know what they're doing, they don't know what they're saying, they're like paralyzed, and it's like, how is any of that consensual?
Yeah.
There's not one of these things where they walk up to you and say, "Hello, let's have dinner, let's talk, let's," it's never like that. They're always in control.
Yeah. That's true.
Okay, so James goes on to describe numerous experiences that happened before the Lear lecture. And he describes one night when the woman came to him and asked him, "Are you afraid of what's in the dark?" And this goes much deeper. She keeps asking him, "Are you afraid of what might be out there? Are you afraid of what's in this like dark expansiveness?" She keeps asking him like if he's afraid of space, basically. Space or the dark. Who knows?
Hmm.
So he had actually told David of this before they went to the Lear lecture. David barely believed him until he was actually at that lecture. And oddly enough, here's the reason James left. Um, James saw the woman from his bedroom standing in the corner of the lecture in the doorway.
Ooh. That gives me the heebie-jeebies a little bit for sure. Like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's on a little bit of a chill. Like that's okay. So in daytime, evening, a room full of people, he sees this woman who's kind of been coming and raping him. Essentially, is kind of what it seems like has been happening. I don't know how on board he is with everything that's happening. Do we know how
don't.
on board he is with everything that's happening?
We know that she's extremely manipulative.
Mm, okay.
And also, at this point, we don't technically know that he's being raped.
Oh, I thought the same thing was happening to him that was happening to Elton, because I kind of feel like Elton was being raped.
Elton was.
Like, I don't think that's what I mean. I don't think he was on board with this. That's why I kind of made that assumption. Like, why is this? When you said coming to the
No,
bedroom, and I just kind of thought
it's
is that not what we're saying is happening?
it's a very good assumption.
But so do we know if that's what's happened, or she's just been showing up in his room? That's
we
all
don't
we know.
know. We just know this pretty woman started visiting him in
Yeah,
puberty.
I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna make the leap for me here personally.
Yeah, I made that same link.
Poor James is being taken advantage of
I made that
by
same leap.
an alien / demon, maybe. So, all right, I'm uncomfortable. Let's keep going.
So, if you remember, James was at the lecture hall. He was listening. He was super nervous for no reason, and then he jumped up and left. Now, what James described to David was that he actually saw this woman in the corner of the room, and he went and chased her. And the closer he got, the more he realized it was her. She ran away, and he actually chased her all the way outside of the auditorium into the parking lot, and she like disappeared behind some cars.
Oh, that's creepy.
And he was just left there alone in this parking lot. So James is divulging all of this to Karla and Elton, and he asked them like if David has ever told them anything. And like David actually did tell him that as a child, James was telling him about Mr. Green Jeans, who was visiting him. And so Karla and Elton invited James to have like a private audience with them to just like have a night with them without David around or anything. And here's what he told them. He said that the woman told him that she was interdimensional, but was benevolent. She said, there are ones who do great harms to humans who think of us as insects. She also told that, I found this interesting, that the evil entities will convince people to get into like crystals. You know, people who are like, I'm a crystal person.
Yeah, what is the significance of that? Why are they doing that?
So she says literally those crystals are just so the evil ones can monitor them.
What is like basically putting like carrying around like a nanny cam with you essentially? You're showing up on a hologram somewhere because of this crystal that you're carrying around or doing stuff with?
Apparently the crystal thing is true, but only to a certain extent. And the crystals vibrate on an extra dimensional level, but they're basically telling these other entities how to find you. It's like a homing beacon, is what he describes.
Oh, that okay. I don't want to get bogged down on this, but I'm definitely looking into something about that. Like, I need more information on that.
Well, they say the crystal people. They say these things vibrate on certain frequencies.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
Well, I know all that part. Yeah, I just had never heard this part, and now I gotta. There's some things that have to be looked into. Anyway, go on.
So James is sitting in the living room with Elton and Karla, and he ends the conversation by going into sort of a frenzy. And he says that he's basically compelled to go visit his relatives in St. Louis.
Well, the devil's got you now.
He's just like, That's such a Kansas City. Right?
It is. Oh, the shade.
So David's like, James is like, I gotta go visit my relatives in St. Louis. Now, at this point, he leaves, and Karla and Elton want to talk to Megan, who's David's girlfriend. So she chimes in about that conversation they had at the bar. And she had a very similar but different recollection. No facts contradict, but she has some extra facts.
Okay.
So she completely recounted what James said, but added that David was a little more involved than previously thought. When James described the woman, the woman that was entering his room, David immediately described her looks and her clothing.
Okay.
So James like, this woman enters my room. She's like, and David's like, she's pale. She has this like he completely knew who this woman was.
Okay.
And then Megan questioned him like, who's this woman? And David said, I don't remember that. And Megan said, you did it twice. You kept remembering it, basically. And then David, almost like in a trance, immediately at this bar said that he denied ever seeing or knowing her. And James actually ended up confirming this set of events, that this conversation did happen between Megan and him, that David did correctly describe this woman, and then Megan like intimidated him, or David like mind blocked out of knowing who this was. Now, that same night, David scared Megan by acting bizarre and strangely. She said David just suddenly changed. His voice and his eyes changed, and he was scaring me. Elton, David's father, asked how. She said that when they got back to the farmhouse from the bar, that David grabbed her arm and tried to drag her into a field. He stated while trying to drag her, there's something out here that you want to see. Yeah. He was trying. Okay, so as he was dragging her into the field, James actually drove up in his car. He was right behind them and interrupted all of this. And when he confronted them, David couldn't remember anything. He couldn't figure out while he was there dragging his girlfriend by her arm. So at this point, Karla called Barbara, the hypnotist, who was very concerned and wanted to talk to both James and David. Now, James went ahead on his trip in late August to St. Louis as the woman from his dreams basically told him to do. Now, at this point, Karla, while James was on the road, was in the shower, and she began basically praying or speaking to these invisible entities. And she recalls saying, "If you are around me right now, invisible, won't you please just give me some sort of sign?" And as she got out of the shower and was drying off, she noticed a solid red triangle appearing on her upper forearm. And that's similar to the mark she had earlier from the last episode.
Yeah.
And she actually, I believe, went to a doctor, but by noon that day, it disappeared.
Oh, wow.
For whatever reason, she asked for a sign, she got the sign, and then it disappeared. Now, James had gone on this trip to St. Louis on August 28th. And he got back from his trip from St. Louis on August 28th, but he didn't talk to Karla until 3 days later. But in between August 28th and August 31st, Karla got a phone call from an ex-girlfriend of James named Nancy. Nancy was disturbed and worried about James. She said his voice sounds strange. He's not making any sense. Now, James contacted Karla and Elton, and at this point, they're all living in Texas. So James, on this road trip to St. Louis, had to drive through Oklahoma, which is where many of our previous encounters happened, to get to St. Louis. He had stopped in McAlester, Oklahoma, and immediately started noticing time issues. At this point in his trip, he has traveled 100 miles, but the odometer on his car only read 37 miles, and he'd only been gone 45 minutes or so. So he had, I did the math. He roughly went double what he should have. There's no reason why in 37 miles, unless you're driving 182 miles an hour, you should have gone 100 miles.
Yeah.
But oddly, also on the same trip, on a stretch between two towns in Oklahoma where he knew he could get food and stuff, these two towns were only 8 miles apart. He had driven for over an hour. This is what James says. Later on that day, I suddenly felt something in my mind telling me to pull over to the side of the road and look to the left. So he did so. He complied. He saw a bright light in the sky making circular motions. And then the lights hovered. And then suddenly lots of colors, red, green, and blue, began flashing suddenly, and the craft shot off. He then reveals that the trip was a command of the woman in his bedroom, who ordered him to travel to a certain hill on Saturday. And he has been increasingly dreading it. And this is a weird part of the book. So he initially told Karla, hey, I got to go visit my family. And then it turns out it's not about that at all. It turns out that the woman in his room told him, you have to go to the certain hill at this certain spot. And that's what it is. And he felt this like dread leading up to it. Like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. But he felt like compelled or controlled to do it.
Okay.
So he tried to fight it off, but he was under control, almost like a spell. He recalls saying, "No, no, no." But while driving, by the way, this is while he's driving, he would recall in his mind saying, "No, no, no." But his arms wouldn't do what he wanted them to do. They would just keep driving to this location.
Weird.
So he drives to this hill out in the middle of nowhere. And then under his own volition, he gets out, he opens his trunk, and he takes out a camera and tape recorder that he had put there to try to document what he would see. But he literally didn't have the self-control to like grab them.
Okay.
So he went up, he sat on the hill until late in the evening. And then he saw 3 lights appear on the top of the hill. They did an intricate series of circles and motions, and the colors again shifted. Then suddenly, telepathically, he heard a voice in his head that said, "See how easily we made you come to this place. You don't have any control over it. In the future, when you're supposed to go to a certain place, you'll be made to go there. Don't worry about it. There's nothing you can do to stop it."
Well, that's concerning.
Yeah.
Like, all right. So we're just going to make you aware that we can, like, control you, basically.
Yeah, it's like a weird power. It's all about power. So he got very sad at that. He's sitting on top of this hill. He hears this message. He thought he was going somewhere, but really he was going elsewhere. But he also made plans to videotape this, but they took control of him. He got disheartened. He's like, as any of us would, if you've ever been in a spot in your life where you want to do something but you can't, like you get sad, like you get disheartened. So he got sad and he decided to drive to a relative's place in Oklahoma. He got there, they calmed him down, and they gave him a bedroom. And he got completely undressed to go to sleep. But as soon as he got to sleep, completely undressed, suddenly he found himself awake on top of that same hilltop.
So now we're just like basically teleporting him almost.
Yeah, we're just messing with you.
Okay. What's happening to him there? So he's back at the hilltop, fully dressed. What's going on?
What happens then is that the woman from his bedroom that has been visiting him showed up. And this time she's in her full form. She's her full body self. No hands, no head. Just, well, all hands, all head, all body.
Yeah.
She shows up. He says she was in a jeans and t-shirt this time. And she began immediately talking about replacing parts of my body.
Oh, here we go again.
She told me that long ago I had made a decision and that had really decided every other decision since then.
All right.
The woman told him that within 5 years, he and the rest of this group of people would be called on to do a specific task that involved that involved a lot of stuff, but also involved, I found this interesting, inhabiting other people's bodies.
Yeah, that's a little interesting.
She told him that literally they might inhabit each other's bodies. They might that they might be used to inhabit other people's bodies. So he asked her for proof. And what she told him was that a girlfriend of his at the time named Nancy was on a date. So when he eventually got back home, he called his girlfriend Nancy to confirm what was happening. And he freaked her out because it turned out she was on a date with another man.
Well, it wasn't his girl. It's his ex-girlfriend. This isn't his girlfriend.
It's his ex-girlfriend at the time of the writing.
Yeah.
But at the time, it was his girlfriend.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So keep in mind this is being written as a book in 1992. So in
I thought
1988,
Megan was his girlfriend.
no, Megan is Daniel's girlfriend.
Oh, okay. Okay.
This is becoming a. This is becoming a.
That's where my
I'm sorry.
confusion was. My bad. That's where the confusion was. Yeah.
Yeah. So at the time, Daniel's dating Megan and James is dating Nancy.
Yeah.
So the woman on the top of the hill tells him to call Nancy because she's on a date. So he does, and it freaks her out. So James next remembers that he was back inside his relative's house, but he was on the front porch in the middle of the night, fully clothed. Now, he swore by this timeline, but only would divulge that he would be activated to perform a specific task at some point. Karla and Elton during this conversation were astonished. So James is going to become, I think, a bigger figure. He seems to be as into this as Elton is.
Okay.
So also around this time, David had an experience where he woke up and felt this immense vibration or energy, which he described as trying to basically extract his essence from his head. Have you ever felt this, by the way?
Maybe.
That's why I wanted to ask you, because I have felt this. Have you ever felt like you're trying to escape out of your head?
Yeah. Something
Yeah,
like that. Yeah.
I have too. I have too a few times. And it really feels like something is physically trying to get out of your head.
Yes.
But you worry because you're like, that's me and I can't get out of here.
Well, I'd never really thought about it this way until now. Now I've got a whole lot of worry going on.
Yo, you should.
Apparently.
So at this point, Karla is still freaking out. She asked Megan, which is her son-in-law, or which is her stepson's girlfriend, Megan, if she'd ever seen anything weird in her life. Megan at first responded, "Oh no, except for that time I saw a monkey in the window."
Yeah, that's a little weird, considering you
Yeah.
like live in the Midwest.
We get this whole family involved essentially. So Megan goes on to explain that when she was 10 or 11, she woke up from a nap and went to the kitchen to get a snack, and she saw a gray monkey in the window bobbing its head up and down.
Hmm.
And in another experience at the age of 12, she woke up in her sister's room with beings. Well, okay, so in another experience, she woke up when she was 12. She went to sleep in her own bedroom. She woke up in her sister's room. Her sister's like paralyzed. And for whatever reason, these beings are playing a slideshow on the wall. And this slideshow shows the moon being destroyed and the debris of the moon falling to Earth.
That's weird.
It gets even weirder, actually. I'm leaving out a lot of the weirder details. I'm doing the same thing I hate. In that story, by the way, when the moon pieces fall to Earth, the human beings start picking up and eating it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Now, years later, Megan describes as a teenager, close to adult, that she was outside of her house and she saw a huge gray fish hovering over her house. Now, at this point, Karla recognizes that she's basically seeing screen memories. Are you familiar with screen memories?
No.
So, screen memories is a concept that these beings can appear to you in one way, but present to you mentally another way.
Okay.
So, for instance, a lot of people who are abducted by aliens will only, until they undergo hypnosis, they'll recall, well, I saw an owl. Well, how tall was the owl? It was like 4 feet tall. Okay, did the owl say anything to you? It said, I'm an owl. I'm an owl. I'm an owl. This is actually a very common thing.
That's weird.
Yeah, and
Oh boy.
it's called a screen memory, and it either means that your memory is being messed with, or while you're witnessing something, they're also putting something inside your head to mess with how you think about things.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Either way, not good.
Either way, very deceptive, not good.
Not good.
So, I'm trying to think of another one. People will see a deer, for instance, or they'll see like a child. Also, all these dream things. Like I saw a child that was like a doll. Could be screen memories. They know they can't erase their memory, so they try to change your memory basically. And with whatever technology they have, they do that. So, the last experience I'll get into with Megan for this episode is when she was a little bit older. And oh no, actually, I'll let's change that. So at this point, Karla goes on to explain that at this point they had friends from the MUFON group, and they got a call from a guy named Fred, who I have a sneaking suspicion might show up later, who began telling her his UFO experiences. And I found this one super interesting. There were like 6 or 7, but he described one where the UFOs were swirling around the sky, and then they formed into some kind of formation, and they like energy linked and created a hologram of a big bearded man in a robe in the sky.
Which we've already talked about in the past, the ability, how seems like we pretty much have the technology at this point to make things look like they're actually happening like that with holograms.
Yeah, it worried me about Blue Beam and the whole idea of
That's what it was.
a false apocalypse or false savior. So let's fast forward to September of 1988. I say fast forward, but geez, we've only been in like a 4-month period.
I say we're moving forward like a month.
So Karla was finally ready to do hypnosis herself with Barbara, the professional hypnotist. So at this point, she'd been having many strange dreams and memories, but had never undergone hypnosis. And this is all really about Elton at this point, except for Elton's kids, and his kids, friends, and girlfriend were having experiences. So at this point, David also was having many UFO dreams. So at this time, the family decided to travel to Oklahoma to where Barbara's house was. And Karla notes that there was just a constant stream of people throughout this house, which she says specifically makes you think about how common or pervasive this phenomenon was. And she really describes staying at this house for a couple of days as just like people coming in and out, in and out. There was just like it's almost like a mecca for people to come talk about the UFO experiences.
Okay, interesting.
Which is scary. So, so at this point, because there's so many people coming in and out, people are talking to each other, like in the kitchen or whatever. And one of the people that Karla met was a woman named Ellen, who lived in a ranch in the northern U.S. with her husband. So Ellen described how once a UFO caused a stampede of their cattle herd. And in fact, Ellen had come to see Barbara almost as a side note. Ellen was actually there because she was going to visit a woman who had agreed to be a surrogate mother for her and her husband. Ellen had had multiple pregnancies, but all of them ended in miscarriage.
Oh, I don't like where this is going.
I know.
Go on, but I don't like where I feel like I know, and I just rip the band-aid off. Let's tell me what happened.
Barbara asked Ellen if she had any unusual dreams lately. Ellen described a dream where a woman came to her in the night and threatened to take the baby away from her surrogate mother. Ellen then describes this spiritual dreamlike realm fight where they had fought to over her unborn child, which is inside the surrogate.
Okay.
Barbara asked, "Have you ever dreamed of this woman before?" And Ellen said, "No, but I've seen her when I wasn't sleeping."
Oh. I don't like how this lady's showing up in the daytime.
It seems like the same late. There seems to be like this sex robot lady who's like,
Yeah, but also is like just in charge of some sort of what I don't know. This is weird. Oh, oh man. Okay.
I told you this would get weirder.
This is very weird. This is very weird.
So Ellen then goes on to describe a real life doctor visit she had during one of these many miscarriages. She was lying on the table waiting for the doctor to come back in the room, and suddenly this exact woman appears in her room.
Oh no. Nope. Oh, okay.
She doesn't get into great detail about the conversation, but she did say that she immediately got the vibe that this woman was an ancestor of hers,
Okay.
and that this ancestor had lost her own children in the past. So this woman, spirit, entity, whatever you want to call her, was resentful, and for whatever reason was causing her descendant to have these miscarriages.
Well, okay. This is. I mean, she obviously had a successful child at some point because she has descendants.
Yeah, right?
So why are you so bitter, Spirit? First of all, why are you so bitter? Why are
Well,
you throwing shade on great 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 granddaughter? Why are you doing that?
Remember, Karla had that weird experience where 3 of her ancestors walked her back to her house and made her start cooking things.
Yeah, just bossy old women.
It's bossy old women, or it's
Go
something.
have a baby. Go cook something like we did in the old country.
Or it's something more deceptive.
Yeah.
And they're making it.
Look, I need to lighten this up somehow because I am very upset right now.
I know. I
and a
know.
little scared.
Ah, gosh, I know. So
questioning headaches now. Just so many things going on.
this is the weird part. So when Ellen was asked to describe the woman, according to Karla, who had had an earlier conversation with James, Ellen gave an identical description of the woman who had been coming into James' bedroom.
I knew you were going to say it, and I didn't want you to say it. It's just one lady running around doing the. That's why they're all together.
They're spiritual beings.
Like something has drawn these people together. It and kept them together, and is like moving in between. It's just. Whew. Okay. All right. So she's seeing the same woman, threatening her about her surrogate baby. Okay.
And also had admitted that she had ended her previous pregnancies.
Oh yeah, and it also killed her babies. Cool.
Killed or taken.
Well, I was actually, when I said at the beginning, I think I know where this is going. I was kind of leaning towards taken in some way, harvested.
And we don't know at this point. We don't.
Well, yeah, but that's where my gut says that's what happened. They weren't wasted. The punishment thing seems like a weird story to tell something.
Yeah. Also, what is the punishment? Like, I'm gonna punish my ancestor. I'm gonna punish my future progeny by killing their children because I couldn't have children. It didn't make any sense.
But again, you also had children at some point, unless it's like I guess
Right.
a
Right.
great
That's what I'm saying. It
great
doesn't make any
aunt or
sense.
something. I guess I guess you could be related that way. You'd be a very
Uh,
distant aunt or whatever.
That's true. Also, why are our, unless they're making league with demons, like how could they have the power to come and kill a child?
Well, that's true too.
I don't know. So at this point, Karla is ultra freaked out.
As am I.
She decides finally, as I teased last episode, to do hypnosis herself.
Okay.
And she's still believing somehow this will prove that this is all some kind of delusion or whatever. And so she does hypnosis with Barbara at her house. And she begins to remember a certain point in her life where years ago she was driving home from her parents' house back to her home with Elton. And it was about a 240-mile journey. She describes that during the day, she saw a large black cloud hovering over the highway. And slowly, this black cloud, which seemed blacker than black, came down over the highway and enveloped it.
Okay.
So she remembers it clearly coming down very swiftly to hover over the road. She remembers entering it and she remembers exiting it, but she doesn't remember what happened inside. Now in the hypnosis, she got a little deeper. She said it was like being in a very dark room and the only lights were inside of her car. Now suddenly, while remembering what happened inside the cloud, she remembers lying down on a table with her shoes off, covered by a white cloth. She says there was pain in her right ear, as if it was stretching, and she believes it's some kind of implant in her right ear. And she remembers people moving quickly around the dimly lit room. And inside of her trance, she started begging for Barbara, the hypnotist, to take her out. She's like, "Take me out. I don't want to remember this."
Whew, okay.
Now, one other, several months later passed before she was ready to try this again. And I have a quote from the book. One other piece of information turned up during our visit with Barbara, which shed light on an experience I'd had earlier, back in May. At that time, I was awakened, hearing voices in the bedroom during the night telling me, "Eliomi, Eliani," and that was from the first episode. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
At least that was the closest I could come to transcribing what I had heard, and I knew it wasn't an exact reading. Whatever had been said, the word made no sense to me then. But in a book I picked up in Oklahoma in September called The Goblin Universe by Ted Holliday and Colin Wilson, I came across references to early Gaelic mythology that echoed that nighttime conversation. The Eliman were pygmy elves, or nature spirits, I read, a name derived from the Welsh to mean a spirit, which in turn came from the Hebrew Elohim, or God. Such spirits have always been known to objectify materiality on occasion, although this is usually in remote country places. Maybe in Wales, I thought, but there was nothing very, very remote about my bedroom. Going further, I read, there are many sorts of fairy or nature spirits ranging from the tiny Elian to the wandering Sengong Elohim, or trooping fairies whose illusions and paranormal hoaxes are an intrinsic part of the flying saucer story.
Interesting.
Yeah, I wondered about including that, but I think I had to because we did Operation Trojan Horse, which drew such a connection between fairy folklore and UFO stuff.
Yeah.
So when Karla returned home, David and James had another incident of missing time while out getting dinner. This story is actually kind of, I hate to say this, it's kind of boring. I left it out because they basically went out to get hamburgers, and then there was like 3 hours of missing time. They got home, the hamburgers were cold, um, but they don't remember anything else.
Okay.
At this point, everyone's getting abducted, is more or less what I'm taking. So this is where it gets weird. There starts to be a lot of poltergeist phenomenon. So David and James get home. They sit down on the couch to eat this cold dinner, and all of a sudden the couch starts jumping. Full.
That's not what you want happening.
No, and they're freaking out, and they get up and they notice the footstool is jumping too.
Okay.
Now, that's how it ended that night. They ran away from the room.
Okay.
Now, at that point, James recalls another visit from the woman a day later who told him that we are 9-dimensional and the 10th dimension is like time to you. And at this point, she also starts switching back and forth between referring to herself as I and we. So it's like she's communicating for multiple people.
Yeah.
Now, in this dream, she warned him about other races or beings that had recently learned how to jump from the 4th to 5th dimension, but were not spiritually developed enough to do so. And I find this very interesting. So this like this human looking woman thing, who's apparently in the 10th dimension, is warning him about a race that recently jumped from the 4th to the 5th. So they're like underdeveloped and they're like kind of evil.
Yeah.
Now, based on her description, these are immediately identified as the Greys.
Okay.
She warned him, be very careful of them. Be very, very careful. And when he told Karla about it, she immediately identified them as these Greys, like the Old One, etc., from his experiences. So poltergeist activity came to define the fall and winter of this family. David woke up with James standing over his bed at one point. This is kind of a funny scene for the book. So, like, David, her son, woke up and he saw his friend James, and James is like, I made it back. They took me, but I made it back, is basically the whole experience. So, also, James was visited by the woman again, who was angry that he has not accomplished his purposes, and they started arguing. Suddenly, James was paralyzed, and 3 basketball-sized balls of lights began circling around him.
Terrifying.
Yeah. So, I just have to go into this whole, I don't know, this whole purposes thing. Like, it seems like they're directing us. I don't know. I the whole idea of the Greys just recently went from 4th to 5th dimension makes sense to me because it seems like they're using it to their advantage. If that makes sense.
Yeah. I can see that.
Okay. So let's go back to Karla. she's starting to realize what's happening. She recounts one night, and this is a direct quote from the book. I was lying down with Elton when I felt the whole bed start to shake. And when I tried to move, I found I was paralyzed. I couldn't even speak, but somehow I finally managed to whisper a prayer, asking the God of truth and love to make this frightening force go away. I repeated the prayer again and again until the paralysis broke, but the bed shook even more violently as my strength increased. At last, I was able to sit up and pound my fist on the bed, demanding out loud that the force must leave me alone, and the shaking stopped. I tried to rouse Elton and tell him what had happened, but he rolled over sleepily without responding. At this point, 3 women came in and approached me. They held me comfortingly and told me, "You did the right thing. You passed the test."
Okay, that was a weird test you just put her through there. Toying and power, control, just everything.
Yep. So that following week, and I will refer everyone to the beginning of this episode, Barbara, and actually one of her researcher friends, George, who was working on a book with her at the time, and this is all documented, both had daughters who were involved in suspicious car wrecks. And even more strangely, both seemed to have mostly sustained injuries to their mouths.
Interesting.
Yeah, to make matters worse, Barbara had been warned by 2 separate strangers who were both men to stop what she was doing, meaning the work on the book with George. And eventually it was published. So Karla is at this point terrified. She describes herself as wanting to leave the world entirely, which is odd given everything that happened. Then she received a phone call from James, who had a dream about being in a classroom and learning a lesson, which is very similar to what Elton described in his childhood.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go ahead and read the dream.
Okay.
Once upon a time. So let me place this here. Elton describes being in a dream state where he's a child, and there's someone who looks like older Elton teaching him stuff. But it's very clear that older Elton is some kind of screen memory, and then there's some other entity telling him this. Once upon a time, there was a young prince. This prince looked around at his world and saw that evil things were happening, and he wanted to stop the evil. So he told his friends, quote, "There must be someone causing all of this evil. So I'm going to go out and search through the world until I find the evil person. Then I'll make him stop." So he roamed all over, meeting and talking to everyone he could, trying to find out who was causing the evil things to happen. But no matter how much he looked, for years and years, he couldn't find an evil person. At last, however, he met a sorcerer who told him that the cause of the evil was under the ocean. The prince was unable to get down under the ocean, and the sorcerer was unable to help him. So the prince returned to the kingdom and stayed there for a year. But he could see that the evil things were still happening and, in fact, increasing throughout the world. Finally, then, he resolved to take up his search again and to try to end the evil. Once again, he roamed throughout the world looking for the evil men, but the man was not found. And once again, the prince met another sorcerer, and this wizard was able to show him how to get under the ocean. The prince did as the wizard told him and made his way under the ocean and began to fight against the cause of evil. Meanwhile, back in the kingdom, the friends of the prince waited anxiously for his return. But the prince remained below the sea, After a long, long time passed, the friends became really worried and decided that they would also go down under the ocean themselves and help the prince in the battle. So they managed to get down under the water, and there they found the prince. They rallied around him and fought in unison, and the evil was finally defeated. The moral of the story is that you need your friends to fight against evil. One man cannot defeat it on his own, but by banding together, our strength can be great enough to win. The message went straight to Karla's heart. An hour before, I was ready to run away, hopeless and hide. But here was a message of hope. Could we really fight this awful situation? I wondered. Did part of the answer lie in uniting with our friends in some way? And how? What is the battle that we face? And there we go.
That was I don't know, that was a weird cap dream there. I don't know what to make of that. I guess I'm gonna have to find out until the next part.
Yeah, you'll get it in the next part.
Cool. Well, this is good, man. Very interesting stuff. I like the way this is progressing. So thank you for putting it together.
I know. I'm so sad that it ends in a woman having breast cancer and another woman dying in a car accident.
A lot of people dying, really, it sounds like.
I think it's weird that Barbara's daughter died in a suspicious car accident.
Yep.
And then, yeah, to be honest, the last episode when I was reading about their biographies and then I was just getting into the book, I was like, who knows? I didn't know that so soon we would get into the government threatening these people. And I'm starting to understand why people are so suspicious. It's pretty weird to write in your first book that the government is trying to kill you.
Yeah.
So.
Well, cool.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you for listening. Please like, share, subscribe, and tune in next week. And we'll see you later. We will finish this journey along with many other tales, both from Patrick and myself. So we love you and good night.
Bye, everybody.